Danjin has the highest overall damage out of all the 4-star characters, making it one of the best free-to-play main DPSs out there currently. This video is going to cover everything from free-to-play options and also pay-to-win options, so this is literally the only guide that you need to watch. Alright, let's get started. Starting off with our active skills, we have the basic attack, where Danjin is performing 3 consecutive attacks, which is going to deal heavy damage. We also have the heavy attack damage, where she simply uses a forte and also the stamina in order to launch consecutive attacks. We also have the mid-air attack, where she consumes stamina once again, and she performs a plunging attack, which also causes heavy damage. Alright, let's move on to her resonance skill, which is probably one of the most unique that I've seen so far. So when she casts the Incinerating Will, each attack consumes 3% of Danjin's max HP. When Danjin is less than 1%, then she no longer consumes HP. So there are a couple caveats to her resonance skill. The first being the Carmine Gleam, where she simply attacks the target and deals havoc damage. There's also the Crimson Erosion, where she either uses her second basic attack, the dodge counter, or even the intro skill to use the resonance skill, which is going to do another 2 attacks, which is going to deal heavy damage. Once the second version of the Crimson Erosion is going to attack the character, it's also going to apply the Incinerating Will towards the target. Now, what's the Incinerating Will? Well, it's the damage that Danjin deals that's going to actually mark the opponent. So the Incinerating Will simply states that Danjin is going to be doing an extra 20% more damage when the target is marked. Finally, there is the Sanguine Pulse, where you use the resonance skill after basic attack 3 to perform up to 3 consecutive attacks, which is going to deal heavy damage. So let me clarify once again. For the resonance skill, you need to do the basic attacks and then utilize the resonance skill. So some of the common combos are going to be the basic attack, then the skill, followed by another basic attack, then a skill, and then another skill. That's one of the combos. The other combo is going to be a basic attack, and then basic attack 3 times. Then you do your skill 3 times as well. So once again, it's going to be basic, then your skill, and skill to do the maximum damage for your resonance skill. Alright, let's take a quick break. So Paxify, the sponsor of this video, has given countless players massive discounts as high as 35% on in-game items. Paxify is a Discord community with over 10k members that saved players over $4.1 million over the last 3 years. And guess what? They're launching an app that makes getting discounts effortless. It's going to be launched towards the end of June. It's the first specialized app, and the Paxify team has prepared special bonuses for our community. Now here's why I'm excited. So you can get early bird bonuses where you can enjoy an additional 15% savings on top of regular discounts for a limited time. You can also get free credits, which you can get up to 500, and you don't need to use your credit cards. You can also get VIP treatment where you get these statuses on both the app and the Discord, and you can also get exclusive access, which beta players can look forward to extra perks. And finally, you can also get the key player perks. If you're leading an alliance or playing at a very high level, you can expect special offers tailored to make your team even stronger. Alright, the spots are limited, so all you have to do is click on the description to join the waiting list to get every single one of the perks. Alright, now let's get back to the video. Now let's move on to her Resonance Liberation, which is her ultimate, and it's called the Crimson Blue. So the Crimson Bloom is actually pretty interesting, and the fact that she can actually stop time when she's in this frantic state is pretty awesome. She's going to be doing a lot of heavy damage with the rapid consecutive attacks, and she's also going to apply 1 Scarlet Burst attack. Now let's move on to the Forte circuit, which is called the Serene Visual. For the Forte circuit, Danjin needs to collect the Ruby Blossom in order to fill up the Forte circuit bar, and the only way she can get this is by using her resonance skill. So once you fill it up to 60, which is the halfway mark for her Forte circuit, then she can use a heavy attack in order to consume the Ruby Blossoms, which then deals heavy damage. It's considered as heavy attack damage and also restores HP to Danjin. However, if it exceeds 120, meaning that it's basically full, then it's going to consume all of it, and the Ruby Blossom is going to deal an increased damage multiplier to the Chaos Cleave which is the previous 60, and also it's going to deal more damage to the Scatter Bloom as well. So what is the Scatter Bloom? It's simply another basic attack after the heavy attack that is performed with the Forte circuit, which also deals havoc damage and is considered heavy attack damage. Now let's move on to the inherent skills. The first is called the Crimson Light, in which the resonant skill, Crimson Erosion, when triggered by a dodge counter, is actually increasing their damage by 20%. The HP cost and the stacks of the Ruby Blossom are also going to double when you're trying to recover them. The second inherent skill is called the Overflow, and basically when Danjin uses the resonant skill Sanguine Pulse, which is of course her third and final E ability, then Danjin's heavy attack damage is going to increase by 30%, which lasts for 5 seconds. Now let's move on to the Concerto skills. So for the intro skill, it's pretty simple. She comes onto the field and unleashes a couple of strikes, which does havoc damage. However, for the outro skill, the next character that is going to be swapped into the field is going to do an additional 23% havoc damage bonus for 14 seconds. Now that you know all the skills, let's talk about her priority when leveling them up. So I would recommend to either level up the Resonance skill first or the Forte circuit first, and then moving on to the Resonance Liberation, and finally the basic until you get to the intro skill. Now let's move on to her weapons. So luckily, the best in slot for us is actually the Emerald of Genesis, which is going to be in the standard banner. So if you forgot, we actually have a weapon of our choice at Union level 45. So if you do manage to get that, you can easily get the Emerald of Genesis for free. However, while you're waiting for that, you can always go for something like the Command of Conviction, which is a 4-star weapon, and also the Lunar Cutter for the free-to-play option. Now let's move on to the echoes. So there are two ways that you can focus the echoes, where you can have a 4-3-3-1-1 composition, or you can have a 4-4-1-1-1 composition. The 4-4-1-1-1 composition is going to help out the free-to-play players. However, you can utilize that and then slowly build onto the 4-3-3-1-1 composition. So let me show you what the 4-4-1-1-1 looks like. So for the cost for echoes, you would want to have Crownless and Dreamless in your team. And for the cost ones, you can have basically anyone. You just want to make sure that the cost ones have attack percentage as opposed to HP or defense. And now moving on to the 4-3-3-1-1, you can either pick Crownless or Dreamless. I personally prefer the Dreamless because of her quick swap ability. For the cost fours, if you're going to go with a crit damage or a crit rate weapon, something like the Emerald of Genesis, then I would recommend to go for the 44% crit damage echo. However, if you are free to play, then I would recommend the 22% crit rate echo. For the cost 3s, I would recommend either the 30% havoc damage bonus or the 30% attack. And finally, for the cost 1s, you want to focus the attack percentage again. For the substats for every single one of the echoes, this is the priority that you want to go for. So first, you want to go for the crit rate or the crit damage. Then you want to go for the attack percentage. And finally, you want to go for the resonance skill damage. And now it's okay if you get some stats that you weren't really looking for. As long as you have like the majority of the stats, you're good to go. Alright, now let's move on to the teams. So for the teams, if you want to use Danjin as the main DPS, then you can have someone like Mortefi, or even Taochi, or even the Havoc Rover as your sub DPS. And finally, generally anyone for the support. Although I would recommend Reina or Danjin, because as we know, Danjin takes a lot of HP when she's fighting enemies, and when she gets hit, there's a very high chance that she could get one shot depending on how low she is. So for Reina, she can provide healing, but also a little bit of shield. However, for Danjin, she can provide a lot of shield, but the animation's a little bit slower. So it's kind of like what you prefer, honestly. If you want to use it for the sub DPS, then I would definitely recommend using Havoc Rover as a main DPS, Danjin as a sub DPS, and just about any support for the third character. This is probably one of the most broken teams out there right now, and it's also free to play, which is perfect. Now let's talk about Danjin's full rotation with Havoc Rover as a sub DPS and Reina as a support. So when you first get into the field, you want to use Reina, utilize her E ability and also her Echo. You want to use her ultimate if available, and then swap into Danjin with the Ultra skill. Once you're in Danjin, you want to try to build up her forte circuit as quickly as possible, as shown in the video. You can use her combos, use Dreamless, and then quick swap into Havoc Rover. So once you are in Havoc Rover, you want to try to build up the Ultra skill once again. However, you want to use a forte circuit, then the ultimate, then the Dreamless, and then swap into Danjin. Once you're in Danjin, you can simply do all your attacks again in order to build the Ultra skill. And once you have the Ultra skill, you want to swap back into Reina after using the Dreamless. Remember, make sure you do use the Dreamless. And then finally, you can continuously repeat the rotation in that method. For a simpler explanation, you simply want to use Reina first, then use Danjin after using Reina's Ultra skill. Then once you build up Danjin's Ultra skill, you want to utilize Dreamless, quick swap into Havoc Rover, and then finally use Havoc Rover, his Dreamless, his ultimate, whatever you need to build up the Ultra skill, and then swap back into Danjin to deal even more damage. Then finally, you can swap into Reina and reset the entire rotation. Alright, let's move on to her sequences, which is actually pretty free-to-play friendly. Because she's a 4-star, you can probably get her sequences kind of like random times when you're pulling for other characters. So for the free-to-play option, I would recommend either the sequence 1 or the sequence 2. For the sequence 1, you're going to be doing an increased 5% attack damage for 6 seconds. It's going to stack up to 6 times. So you're actually doing an additional 30% extra damage whenever she's using her resonance skill. For the second sequence, when Danjin is attacking a target with the resonance skill, then she's going to be dealing an additional 20%. Now, if you got really lucky, or if you plan to buy all of her sequences, then what you can do is get sequence 5 and 6, which for sequence 5, her Havoc damage bonus is actually going to increase by a further 15% and also increase by another 15% when her HP is lower than 60%. So it's a really good bonus. So for her final sequence, the heavy attack, which is the forte circuit, is going to increase the attack of all the team members by 20%, which is really good if you're either going to be the main DPS or even better if you're going to be using Danjin as a sub DPS. Alright, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and I also highly recommend you to join the Discord because we have personal events and also a really good community that you guys can just chill and hang out with. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.